good afternoon, and not quite good evening, but good evening to whoever it's evening for. To in-house counsel from all across America. Welcome to In-House Connect. My name is Shai Mahani. I'm the CEO and co-founder of In-House Connect, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. Thank you for joining us for this amazing presentation from the award-winning TEDx speaker, Theo Kapodistrias. We are all thrilled to learn from Theo about how to communicate better. But before we get to that, for those of you who are here for the first time, let me give you a quick bit of background on In-House Connect. In-House Connect started 11 years ago as a New York City-based meetup group for in-house counsel. Every month, In-House Connect will organize free CLE classes, which are hosted by different law firms, which were then followed by cocktail networking receptions. And every 6 months, we'd organize fun and festive networking mixers. Over the years, we've helped thousands of in-house counsel connect with peers and outside counsel alike. The group was humming along, and then, of course, COVID hit. We couldn't meet in person, so we went online, and it's been a wonderful transition. We've attracted a huge audience of in-house counsel from coast to coast. We've been able to facilitate networking and relationship building, and we've been able to facilitate high-caliber speakers from all across the world, like the one we have today. Theo is actually based in Australia, so that is crazy, the marvels of technology. And I'm going to introduce him in just a few moments. So this is actually our 24th event of the year so far, so I'm wondering who here is here for the first time. Let me know in this poll. I see we have 36% new people, so it's wonderful to have you with us today. Thanks for joining, and hello to the remaining 64%, or the returning 64%, I should say. Great to have you back. All right, today's event, Communication Skills for In-House Counsel. Our speaker today is Theo Kapodistrias. Theo is a keynote speaker, trainer, and advisor. Theo joins the speaking world with a background as a multi-award-winning lawyer who practices as an in-house lawyer based in Hobart, Tasmania. As an in-house lawyer, Theo was awarded the 2017 and 2018 Lawyers Weekly 30 Under 30, the Academia Training and Education Lawyer of the Year at the 2018 Corporate Counsel Awards, the Young Lawyer of the Year at the 2020 Law Society of Tasmania Awards, the Excellence Awardee at the 2021 Australian Law Awards. Theo was also identified as a rising star in the 2019 Legal 500 GC Power List and as a rising star in the 2022 Australasian Lawyer Rising Stars list. Coming to us live from Australia, all the way from down under, Theo Kapodistrias.
Thank you, Shai. What a awesome little introduction, and I'm very excited to be here, coming to you from the future. It's currently 6 a.m. Wednesday morning, so I'm pretty pumped that not that COVID happened, but that we have these opportunities to be able to connect with people all around the world in new ways. And hopefully you can understand me. I would hate it if at the end of this you think, what is this guy saying? I can't understand his accent. So I'll try and keep it slow so I don't confuse anyone, because I know sometimes the Australian accent can be a little tricky to understand. Thanks, everyone. I can see your messages coming through as well. So to give you a little introduction beyond what Shai already said, I come from a little place called Tasmania, which is in Australia. So it's a little island underneath, which you've probably seen before. If you're familiar with I think it's the Looney Tunes, the Tassie Devil, that's me, that's my people. And in Tassie, I grew up in this amazing sort of retail background where my grandparents and my family have run a corner store, and I've been part of that for all my life. And I, even as a lawyer, I still help out my family and pop in there. But through that experience, it gave me the opportunity to really work with and speak with a lot of people, which is where I gained my passion for helping people with communication skills and working with people on developing their communication skills. With all of that, I became a lawyer. I've been working as a lawyer for over 8 years and have been a general counsel. So I've only worked in-house, so I know exactly the issues that you're facing because I face them too. And I'm still an in-house lawyer as well. So I began my legal career as a corporate lawyer in 2014 at the University of Tasmania, went on to become general counsel at a global tech company. It was a US company as well. So I was Australian lawyer, US lawyer, working from my little hometown, and then also went on to I left that job and went on to my corporate role at Tourism Tasmania, which is a bit of fun. And alongside of all of that, I also run my own business as a speaker and public speaking coach. But my hobby is to run TEDx Hobart, which is a lot of fun. So that is something which, is really important to me to enable people to be their best selves, to present ideas and really gain their clarity of thought in presenting an idea. With all of those experiences, I come to you with this topic called turning the technical into the practical, those communication skills for in-house counsel. And, we'll kick off into some of that hard-hitting content right now. But I thought I'd begin by telling you about this time where I was just sitting at a cafe. I was scrolling on my phone, having a look at all of the, amazing things online, the Twitter, the Instagram, LinkedIn, scrolling through, just enjoying some of that content with a nice coffee. And I jump on Instagram and I see this pop up. I'm only responsible for what I say, not what you understand. And I could have spat my coffee out all over the window, because to me, I just thought, how wrong, how incredibly incorrect is this statement? Imagine receiving a question from a client, one of your internal business partners, who wanted some clarification on something that you advised. But instead you chimed back with, I'm only responsible for what I say and not what you understand. That is how you would be responded to. It's just not a practical or useful thing to say, no, I'm not going to do that. If you were to tell that to your business partners, to the CEO, to the people that you work with, they would immediately tell you to pack your bags and leave. Incredible, isn't it? As legal counsel, we should always aim to enable the business to support the things that the business is doing, and to really, demonstrate our value in the best way that we can. And one way we can do that is through providing easy to understand, practical and beneficial legal advice, which the business can understand and can pick up immediately. So this is the sort of context that I wanted to come into this conversation with, because I think it's going to be really important for us to think and hone in on that. And with that, want to be better than what we are today in terms of how we communicate and how we provide our legal solutions to the business. So I want to take us back on a little journey to the old law school. Now, probably for some people, for me, I know it was a little while ago now, so it's a bit of a distant memory. But think back to those days where you were carrying your little backpack, textbooks, coffee in hand, and you thought you were pretty awesome. And law school taught us a lot of amazing things. It taught us how to think like a lawyer, how to problem solve, how to identify, some of these really key issues. But it also taught us some really weird and confusing words. And I don't know how many of you use these types of things today, because I'm going to assume that you would have learned some of these Latin terms as well. So think of your ipso facto, oratio decidendi, tort feasor, things like this, which, all sorts of other really technical legal terms. In some circumstances, these legalese may be really important. They, help establish some sort of consistency with, a term and the definition that should be used for its meaning. It helps to make it really clear what we want to say, how something can be interpreted. And therefore, we use these, technical legal terms as a way to be understood by others in the profession. And also, for the court to interpret it, our terms in a particular way. And, once upon a time, we would be viewed as being incredibly impressive if we were able to use some of these terms in front of people. You might find that people would fall off their seat in absolute awe at the utterance of hearing the term litigation or hereunto. And that's kind of nice. That's a bit of fun. However, that isn't practical. That isn't useful. It isn't useful to the people that we work with to speak in a really technical kind of way. Unfortunately, the only people who understand those words and know what they mean are other lawyers. And we don't tend to work with other lawyers. I mean, absolutely, we work with in-house counsel, but our external counsel and other in-house counsel within our teams, for those who have teams. But generally, they're not the people that we're assisting. They're not the people that we're providing advice to. So it doesn't help anyone if that is who we're speaking to and providing these technical terminologies to. So what we want, what our absolute goal should be as in-house counsel, is we need to be able to provide practical and useful advice that our clients can pick up, read, and run with to conduct their business and to do the things that they need to do. We want to enable them. And the entire premise by which we are employed is to be a strategic partner. If I'm not, I think, that's the point, to be strategic, to be part of the decision-making table. And we need to be there to enable projects and to risk mitigate. And if what we're saying is really confusing, we're not understood, we might not be engaged in further conversation to actually help people. If we're not providing a clear path forward, maybe, we're not going to get involved in those conversations. We're not doing our job properly. So, that's not good. But for our focus this evening for you and this morning for me, we're going to talk about these things here. So we're going to talk about, our communication and using our communication as a means to build trust and, the importance of it. We want to ensure that our clients and our stakeholders trust us and believe us, what we're saying is going to be of assistance to them, because that's going to be of the utmost importance for moving forward in that relationship. Also be looking at the best way to tailor our communications so that it's relevant to the audience that we're talking to, ensuring that, we remove that sort of technical language and we keep it as simple and clear as we can. The next part of this journey is we're going to be looking at communicating in the language of the client and how important that can be. And then we'll look at terminology and using plain English as a way to, finish off and ensuring that, the things that we say can actually be read and understood. And of course, providing in a really clear and easy to understand structure. So we're going to look at a few structural things as well, which should be a lot of fun. Let's start with, why is this important? Why do we believe our communication skills are important? We may not realize it, but our communication may not be as good as we want it to be. For some people, it could be really bad, and that's not good. In some circumstances, we could be of the belief that everything is fine. There's nothing to improve. There's no issues, and it's all fine. But really, there's always room to improve. Other reasons why we, don't actively or try necessarily to look to improve our communication or, transform it in a way that enables us to be better is that, we may have some limiting beliefs or even common fears. And they may include that, we believe that we're born good at communicating, that we don't need to practice at it or try or keep going. Therefore, practice doesn't actually help. We might be afraid of failing, and that's such a common thing for lawyers in the legal profession because we are perfectionists. So if we don't want to do something we can't perfect, we don't want to practice or keep going at it. And we may even have the mistaken belief that good communication is all just common sense. We might think, yeah, this is so easy and it's fine and I don't have, any of these issues. Or we may assume that others know what we know. So when we communicate, we don't need to communicate as clearly. And that's not going to be helpful either, particularly for people that aren't legally minded or understand what they're talking about from that legal perspective. So improving our communication involves more than just dismantling the message, disseminating the message properly as a means for it to be heard, although that is really important too. But it means ensuring that the message resonates with the people that we're speaking to and can be understood by the listener in a way that it will help them to move to action, because we want to be influencers of good decision-making. That's your quote for the day, being an influencer of good decision-making. And that is going to be the thing that takes us to that next step as legal counsel, particularly those with GCs and at that operating table. Now, I didn't refer to these, but, clear communication is incredibly important, because without it, it's going to be really hard to develop that level of trust. And, these are some of the reasons why improving our communication is important, and is that influence piece. It is the value we can provide, and it is ultimately that trust piece. Now, I have a little kitty here because how cute is the kitten? But, that trust piece is going to be so critical. Without being trusted, we're unlikely to develop those strong relationships that we hold really critical, and that are really critical for us as that internal business partner to support the business. Essentially, we're unlikely to then, have our clients come to us and, need us to be there and actually invite us into that decision-making table if, we're not providing the support that is necessary. And then we may get dragged into matters at that last minute, only because of a formality, because of a process piece, not because we're actually considered necessary to help out in a project. And that's where, we're not doing our job properly. And that could be really scary. So being able to provide practical and clear communication will be incredibly critical to get right initially. And then it's going to be really critical for building those relationships, ensuring that our internal stakeholders believe us, trust us, and they actually want to communicate with us. I want to go through a little method called the trust triangle. Frances Frey, I'm not sure the pronunciation, from Harvard University, she explained in her TED Talk about how to build and rebuild trust. And trust, as she explained, is the foundation for everything that we do, particularly in our roles as lawyers. We should think about it as being one of the core elements of what we do. We rely on being trusted, and we rely on that trust within our organizations as well. In her talk, Frances identifies, these three elements of, the trust triangle, and how we can apply them to our lives. So she mentions, if you sense that I'm being authentic, you're more likely to trust me. If you sense that I have rigor in my logic, you're more likely to trust me. And if you feel my empathy is directed towards you, you're more likely to trust me. So when all three of these are working properly, we have trust. If any three of these, if any of the three are threatened, then that trust is threatened. If there's a bit of a wobble, then our trust is likely to be broken. And that's really important for us to rebuild. For our focus today, I'm going to mainly focus on logic and authenticity. Now, empathy is important, but it's not part of that sort of greater communication piece. But if we look at logic, the quality of our logic is going to be really important. And as lawyers, we do the research, we know the law. So there shouldn't be issues with the quality, but it's how we communicate that logic that's going to be really important. So let's consider two ways, right, to communicate stuff. One is You can take people on a journey. You can tell them the twists and turns without getting that sort of main point across until the very end, the punchline, if you will. However, if we're in the boardroom and we're communicating, our logic that way, we could get interrupted at every point as we tell that story. Instead, the best thing to do is to provide the point in a particular way at the beginning and then provide that additional backup information. So if you struggle to gain that attention, you struggle to actually be able to communicate that point and be listened to at that table, why not, change things up, structure your communication a little bit differently, because that'll be, more beneficial for you, and it'll essentially allow you to get credit for that point that you've made. Now, we'll look at, how to structure our communication a bit more as we get through this presentation. So we'll get in on that point a little bit more. But I want to move to the next part of the triangle, which is authenticity. If we hold back who we are, we're less likely to be trusted. If we're not authentic, we're not trusted. And, the less likely to be trusted, the less likely we are to be able to demonstrate our capability. If we, without being able to demonstrate our capability, we then aren't going to get promoted. So if we don't speak in a way that is authentic to us, we might not. And it is important that we speak in a professional and clear way. But what's really important is we need to be true to who we are in terms of how we communicate. So the business partners we speak to are our colleagues as well as our clients. So there's a bit of a mixed relationship there. And part of that is being able to speak in a way that is authentic to us, but not coming across a bit fake, as we're expected to be in legal terms. I want to show you this example. You could say this. In witness whereof the parties hereunto have set their hands to these presents, as a deed on the day, month, and year hereinby mentioned. That's a lot. And we don't talk like that. So when we use this communication in, either verbally or in our written text, it can be incredibly confusing. You can say all of this, or you could say this, signed on the date. Pretty easy to understand. Super clear. That in itself makes a lot more sense. Now, the first one to a lot of people is going to come across like this. Hieroglyphics. We don't understand it. We don't get it. And we don't want to communicate in a way that isn't going to actually work. Now, I've got a video coming up. I'm going to see if this works. I love testing tech on the go. Now, I love that little TikTok, and this is a friend of mine who's based in the UK. This is Sarah. She goes by either Very Lawyer Problems or Law But How, and I totally recommend you check her out on Instagram and TikTok. She's great. But this video in itself kind of articulates that point of, what world are we living in? Are we living in this, ancient kind of world where we're just communicating things because we think that's how we should communicate as lawyers? Or are we communicating in a way to demonstrate our value and to really show a practical side to the law? Ugh, sorry, I misplayed it again, which wouldn't be a bad thing. It's a fun video. I want to talk about our audience. So the most critical question to ask yourself is, before you write or speak or communicate at all, who is my intended audience? Who are the people that need to hear what I actually am communicating? So if you're not tailoring your advice or how you communicate, and what you're communicating to a particular audience you may be completely missing the point, right? So you're not doing your job properly. Oh, I don't think we're doing our job properly if we're not communicating and providing our advice in a way that is going to be practically understood by the people that are reading it or listening to it or understanding it. Now, I am, and tailoring our communication and, how we tailor it is going to be super, super critical. Now, through a lot of my training programs, when I train people on communication, I have a 5-step methodology. And the first one is, clarity of who you're talking to and clarity of, that sort of message that you're providing. But it's gaining clarity of, your audience and who you need to speak of. Now, an example of someone or an organization that did this really well is, of course, Netflix. And I don't know if anyone else has seen this cease and desist they wrote. And I'll read it to you because it's honestly, I think, one of the best pieces of viral legal work that I've seen come through. But a group received a cease and desist, which goes like this. Dear Danny and Doug, my walkie-talkie is busted, so I had to write this note instead. I heard you launched a Stranger Things pop-up at your Logan Square location. Look, I don't want you to think I'm a total wasteoid, and I love how much you guys love the show. Just wait until you see season 2. But unless I'm living in the upside down world, I don't think we did a deal with you for this pop-up. You're obviously creative types, so I'm sure you can appreciate that it's really important for us to have a say in how our fans encounter the worlds we build. We're not going to go full Dr. Brenner on you, but we ask you that you please, 1, not extend the pop-up beyond its 6 weeks, run ending in September, and 2, reach out to us for permission if you plan to do something like this again. Please let us know as soon as possible that you agree to these requests. We love our fans more than anything, but you should know that the Demogorgon is not always as forgiving, so please don't make us call your mum. Thanks. Now, how good is that? I just think it's the best, and it just provides that level of, tailoring a message in the most perfect way, right? It's talking to the fans of the show Stranger Things, and they loved it and they love it. And then this all went viral. How cool, because obviously they received it and they thought, this is awesome. This is so fun. So I'm going to have a little sip of water. All right. So now I'm going to show you 2 examples. I'm going to show you 2 things, and I want everyone to comment which one they prefer, 1 or 2. So just a little bit of background on this first. Here in Australia and New Zealand as well, when the pandemic came along, we went into a lockdown. So the government told us, all right, you're only allowed out for, a couple of essential purposes, nothing else. So we complied, and there were some states in Australia that, had to be on lockdown for ages. But at the very beginning of the pandemic in 2020, nationally, we all went into a lockdown for a couple of weeks, and New Zealand did something similar. So that's one of our neighboring countries. They did something similar. So the first thing I'm going to show you, and you can vote on whether you prefer 1 or 2, is a text message from the Australian government, and they said, "Coronavirus Ausgov message: to stop the spread, stay 1.5 m from others, follow rules on social gatherings, wash hands, stay home if sick." And then the New Zealand government sent this message. This is number 2. I'll skip the beginning bit there. This message is for all of New Zealand. We are depending on you. Follow the rules and stay home. Act as if you have COVID-19. This will save lives. Remember, where you stay tonight is where you must stay from now on. You must only be in physical contact with those you are living with. It is likely level 4 measures will stay in place for a number of weeks. Let's all do our bit to unite against COVID-19. Kia haha. So I want you to vote on which is most effective, which is more effective. Text message 1, the yellow one, or text message 2? What are we thinking? I'm seeing a lot of 2s. I'm seeing a lot of 2s coming through. I think I've only seen 2s. And kia haha is kaha is a New Zealand Maori language. So that's them saying goodbye or thank you in that language. Yes. Okay. So we have overwhelmingly, I think everyone has said text message 2, which is pretty much the result that would. Oh, we've got a 1, Eric. Okay. This is pretty much the result that's happened, pretty much every time I've done this presentation. Essentially, it's probably the better text message because it does a few things. It's less ambiguous. There's no mention of, 1.5 M, like what is that? It gives you very clear explanation of what to do. It tells you where you are tonight is where you must be from now on. Totally. That makes sense. That's as clear as it can be. It doesn't use vague terminology such as social distancing. At that time, we didn't know what that was. Like that's a new terminology for us, as part of our lexicon at the time. But now, we get it. But at the time, March 2020, what even is social distancing? I don't know. And the second one also provides guidance. There was clear guidance about what we should be doing. And it made us feel safe as well. And someone in the comments said, well, yeah, it's relevant if you actually read it. Of course. You could just not read it and then there you go. But I think for mass communication, when you're communicating a very big message to a lot of people, being able to explain it in the clearest, most basic format is incredible. So moving on, I thought it'd be really good to look at how other industries work because we as lawyers can learn a lot from, our friends in marketing or advertising, I should say. And that advertising is a really good example of those who tailor their communications for a particular audience. Advertisers will, generally target a very specific market they need to, who need to purchase or buy or do something to make money. So, we love that. They conduct, significant research into what works, who watches what at what particular time, who's going to be, clicking this ad, whatever it might be, and then making that connection. So connecting the products with people, even in situations where the customer doesn't even realize they need something. Yeah, we love that. So we as legal counsel want to, influence an appropriate decision or an outcome for our business, generally speaking, or we want to help guide and direct how the business is doing its stuff. And, our advice must, ensure and instruct them to do that. We want to tell them what is legally and ethically the right thing to do and the best way to conduct business. So we need to think like an advertiser to really help demonstrate how important, how useful our message can be. Introducing a new concept called AIDA, I guess we'd say. This is following on from our advertising. This is a marketing technique, and it's some of that old school marketing stuff that is one of those core principles which people think about. And it looks at the idea of getting attention, attracting interest, creating desire, and closing with action. So if we apply this to our legal advice, to get attention, we want to gain that attention of our client. Every time they pick up an email, they, listen to a phone call of ours, they need to be aware of what are the key risks, and their attention should be on those really critical things. We want to be able to attract interest. How are we keeping our advice relevant and useful and on point? Because if it's too long, are they going to read it? If it's, a big block of text, it might hurt people's eyes. And we're going to look at that structure piece as we carry on in this conversation too. But we want to create desire. So are we connecting, the legal risks with opportunity factors and detailing some of those commercial gains? Like, are we keeping people interested in what's in it for them and how this can benefit, their perspective as well? And of course, we want to close with action. This is how we can be that influence piece, how we can provide that influence to our clients to help them with their decision-making. This would be, providing recommendations and actions which we believe are important and what the business should be taking, and structuring that in a way that is going to be clear for the business to understand. So I'm going to quickly go back to our favorite topic of COVID-19. So I believe these images, the following images, are from a Canadian government, or the Canadian government, who created or found a need that, some of the COVID-19 messaging wasn't making it across to some of their younger population, those like the 20 to 30 somethings. I'm going to keep the 30 somethings in the younger generation because that's me. So, they weren't sure if they were picking up on, some of that important messaging. So they had to create messaging that worked for them, for that audience, I should say. Act like you have an ankle monitor on. Stay home. Act like 90% of belly buttons. Stay in. Or act like your ex just walked into the party. And we all know that feeling when you just avoid eye contact. But I think that is a brilliant way and such a visual way to understand the idea of social distancing, to use that. And I think that is just heaps of fun. But these examples, they all do is provide a message that is tailored to that very, very specific audience, and it aims to influence that decision, that a decision from them, an action. It says, stay home, stay inside, avoid people. So, it's really important to always think about who you're talking to and how you're advising them, and how that advice will also be interpreted and convey that message that you want to convey. When we essentially deliver a message, we tend to make a lot of assumptions. And it's really important that we don't assume that our message is going to be understood by our audience. So we need to ensure that, anything we say, that message, the advice we provide is going to be clear and ultimately leads to the outcome that we are, looking for, the business is looking for. I'm going to show you this little video. Yes, we have another one. How cool. If I click that.
Hey God, what's up? Hey Angel, did you give the dinosaurs more muscle like I asked? What? I told you to make them meteor. Make them a meteor. 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 Meteor.
So that's just one way of being sure that, it's really important to be clear and don't make assumptions on what you said or what you think the other person understands. So being really clear in our language is going to be important. And we're going to look at that idea of plain English soon as well. So when we communicating, we could use the language of our clients essentially to help us. So every organization and, has its own way of speaking, its own sort of internal lingo. And there are concepts and issues that are going to be very specific to, a particular industry and a business. And it's important for, us as lawyers to use that terminology and to play on that same level as those that we are talking to. And although, we have our own language, absolutely, we generally are the only ones who are going to be the ones to understand it, who are touched by it, which we touched on before. So, there are a few ways that we can sort of break down looking at, the client's language, and that is, through industry. So, through a particular industry, is there terminology that's used? Through our companies, is there specific stuff that is discussed only within our companies that our company people would understand? And the final is, the department, the particular department that we're talking to. So if we think about industry, as lawyers, we are expected to know the industry of our clients. So we need to know and be clear on that industry as well. So important to know, the language that's being used within that specific industry and terms which are going to be commonly found. So if I think back to my time at a university, there were things which would only pop up in that sort of higher education context. That, there would be terms such as Cat 1 funding, which is, a particular category of funding which is more important than, Cat 2 and Cat 3 and all of that other stuff. The idea of, peer review, authorship, academia, terms such as MTA, which is material transfer agreement, which you might not even come across in other contexts other than maybe medical spaces. And you'd see, titles of, my colleagues within the business, such as Dean or Ask Pro, which is, associate professor and stuff like that. We don't often understand or think about that. And, there are other things such as, TEXA, which is our regulatory body. And then moving into, the idea of being in a company. Thinking back to my university days, working at a university, there were a heap of terms which, would only be used within that company. So, I'd hear people say VC, and then to a lot of people, that's venture capital. But within that a university, it's vice chancellor, which is the most critical person in the organization, essentially. But then also there are, acronyms and terms such as DVCR. And you might think, is that a way to watch movies? But no, it was actually the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research. So using, these terms that we hear that the clients use with the client is going to be a way to kind of connect with them and to speak with them in a language which they understand. And if you think about like the particular department, there's going to be ways of communicating the same language that you're advising on to really help them. So it's important to know which section of the business your client's from and how to explain things in a way that could be really useful for them. So I think about, the marketing department, and if I had to get privacy matters across the line, I wouldn't talk about, hey, you need to go get the personal information consent form signed by these people. I would instead say, we need talent release forms. We must get these talent release forms signed by the talent. And people would connect with that because they understood what that meant. You must secure the talent. So if we look at terminology, the words we use and how we use them can paint a particular light. And also it can have a really significant impact on how the message will be delivered. So we spoke about earlier about, those law school days and terminology use and all that technical Latin terminology and all that fun sort of stuff as a way to demonstrate our knowledge. But, evidence suggests that, in fact, looking at using big words and fancy words actually can make us look a bit dumb. Who knew? There were two studies that I want to talk about. The first is, I think they're both from Princeton University. The first one, it looked at a range of admission essays. And this is kind of a new concept to me, but in the US, apparently, I'm told to get into a university or a college, you have to write an essay, which was really interesting, or that might be a mandatory requirement for some. The study it conducted some research on, the essay submitted, and it looked at one in particular, and it provided it in 3 formats. So all on the same topic, but they use sort of different words. They provide a really complex one, like a really, really technically complex one, an easier to understand one, and then a very basic one. And it resulted in the more basic one being ranked higher than those which were more complex, which, there you go, kind of interesting, isn't it? Research study 2, researchers got together a range of research papers, and those researchers took the first 144 words of the publication. So in some of these publications, or in one case actually, they left those words intact. In another case, they replaced all words with, 9 letters or more with things that are shorter, using the synonym function through Microsoft Word, which is a godsend. But what resulted was that when people read the less complicated, shorter word version, the people reading it assumed that the author was more intelligent because they were able to explain their point more clearly than that which is more complicated, which I find super interesting. And we want our legal communications, to be really clear and succinct, and clear enough to be understood by those who are really busy. And Susan explains beautifully in her book, Clear and Concise, that using plain English enables the reader to focus on the message rather than being distracted by difficult language or complicated sentences. And plain English is probably one of, the most important means we have to provide a communication, a solution to a client. And when we're a lawyer, our knowledge is assumed. People know that we've had to work hard for where we are. And when we provide our advice, it should, support those who are reading it. But it needs to be in that format which is understood by the masses. And, we know that, we can provide some brilliant, brilliant work, but it needs to be understood and read by so many people. So the solution is using plain English, thinking about those really complex, hard, difficult words and thinking, is there an easier way to explain this? Using shorter sentences, easy to understand words that are going to be understood by anyone picking it up and reading it. Now, I know that my academic colleagues that I used to have, they're incredibly smart, but they didn't know the law. So using technical legal terms isn't going to help them. But, there are going to be some words which, you think, oh, is that technical? Is that not? There are some which are just concrete English words that, everyone knows, everyone uses, and you can use them. That's fine. But think about, the overall message, and are you using those big words, those complicated words regularly? Like the occasional one is going to be okay if there's nothing else to use. But think of bread. Be plain. Be as plain and basic as you can be. I want us to touch on pretty quickly, because I know we are running out of time, the idea of structure and presentation. Now, I want to show you this really beautiful scientific poster. Now, you could probably comment on all the things that are wrong with it. Quite a lot, right? It's hard to read. You don't know what's going on. The text is small. I mean, look at those beautiful stars. And yeah, feel free to chime in if you want to make some comments on this beautiful piece. I don't know what's in the corner there. A squirrel? I don't know, honestly. But we don't want, like, you would look at this and you wouldn't be very happy. So imagine if you were your client and they received an email that looked like this. Oh, mini Chewbacca. Ah, thanks, Jay. Imagine receiving an email that looked like this, right? Just a big block of text. If I received that, I would say this: TLDR. Too long, didn't read. Probably one of my favorite little acronyms I write to people if I don't understand what they're saying. So, we need to think about our sort of written communication and how it comes across, particularly in email, right? Because if you think about email, there are 112.5 billion business emails sent each day. And we, on average, and this is a statistic from a couple of years ago, so it's very likely changed. But on average, we receive 122 work emails every day. So if we're receiving that many emails and our clients are receiving that many emails, how are we going to use our email, our communication, our main means of communication to gain the attention of those who are reading it? We don't want it to just sit in a pile with, everything else. But a way to structure our emails in a way that will be effective so it can be read quickly is through, the summary structure based, right? So you provide a, high-level summary of what you're saying, and then you can have the option to provide more if you really want to, which is a bit of fun, which is cool. And that's, a really common way that people have structured legal advice in the past. I want to introduce something new to you. Maybe new to you. And this is something I touched on in the latest episode of my podcast called Craft Messages That Matter. This is what episode 3 is about. And it's about the what, so what, now what method. This is something that was used in the review space, where people would do an activity, come together, and they'd say, all right, I really now need to review that activity. And they go through like a reflective activity of what, so what, now what. But I've seen it used, and quite effectively, this structure can be used for how we can actually communicate an answer. So let's say, we get we get a question to us. Someone needs help on, the privacy law of, your particular area, about, whether they can do this or that with someone's personal information. We would respond back in the what, so what, now what format, right? So the what is, hey, hey, Susan, you've asked me this particular question, and I understand this to be the situation, right? So that's the context, the what. You don't have the so what, where you can apply the law. You can practically say, this is how you can do this, do that. These are your circumstances. This is the best way to move through this situation. It's the analysis part, the key advisory part. And then we have the now what, which is the solution, this is what you should do now to solve the issue, or the call to action, you must go and do this. This is the thing you need to do. And Matt Abraham of Stanford beautifully says that communication structures serve as scaffolding for our messages. And I really, really, really love that, because being able to present our advice and our communications in a clear format for it to be understood is really the scaffolding we need to provide the best advice we can, to provide the best service we can as in-house counsel. And that's what we want, to be as effective and as useful as we can be. And that's the presentation. It is now 7:02 a.m. here in Australia, and Shai is back. And I think we've got a little bit of networking happening soon, don't we, Shai?
Cool. So first of all, thank you, Theo, for that entertaining and engaging, presentation. I love the TikTok videos. First time on an IHC presentation, we've had TikTok videos presented. So, you broke that barrier, and that was fun. We have some questions from the audience. So we talked about, crafting our message and audience and all of that good stuff. But what about, communicating difficult decisions, or how do you say no to somebody? How do you communicate a tense situation, do it, effectively? Do you have any tips on that? And folks, if you're out there and you want to ask questions, you can put it in the chat or message me directly and I'll feed it to you.
I think Brene Brown says it best when she says, clear is kind. So you don't want to dance around a particular issue if it's not good, if it's going to detriment the business. Clarity and being clear is the most effective thing you can do. And as in-house counsel, we don't tend to say no because we don't want to be known as the department of no. So how do we structure our advice in a way that isn't a no, but a, have you thought about this? So it's sometimes a way of twisting what people have asked to say, hey, Susan, I know I'm using the name Susan. We'll go with it. Susan, look, I know you've suggested that we, the activity this way, but have you thought about doing it like this? This is probably going to be more effective and more appropriate for the business and from a risk perspective as well. I really understand your perspective and how hard you've worked, but I believe from a legal stance, this is the best way we can do it. I think it's about being clear in what we want to explain, being kind as well. So explain in a way that is respectful of the person and the work that they've put into it, and just being upfront. Like, we don't need to hide. Like, we have to discharge our duties as a lawyer. And if we're not explaining that and doing that appropriately, clearly, effectively, it's not going to be beneficial for our friends. So yeah, I guess that's just a way of being able to structure it and deliver it in the nicest way.
I like that advice. What about if you're redlining with opposing counsel and, you don't agree, or, do you have any tips that you've encountered, in that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, that's where the comments function is going to be really important, because often you just get people that say, don't agree, and they just cross out everything, and then you get a document back that's, not the same thing that you have ever seen before. So sometimes it's about using that comments function in the best way to really explain why. Why is this important to you? And then if you get into a negotiation about it, that's where you explain the interest piece. Like, why is this an important change for you? I know that when I was in a university context, there would be things that were very specific to universities, such as, we'd have students involved in a project. So anytime I'd see an IP clause, I'd have to do like carve outs for students. And, another party would see that and think, why have you done this? And I'd explain, sorry if this looks a bit funny, but I needed to make this change because it's really critical for the university that the students are treated differently. The IP they create is part of their thesis. Their thesis is a piece of work that they own, and I had to include this carve-out specifically for XYZ. So I think using the comments function in our redlining can be really effective to explain clearly why a change is being made, because that gives context to the other side. And then it's hopefully going to be useful for them too, to know, oh, okay, I mean, I get it. I understand the perspective. So it's about just, once again, being clear and explaining in just a succinct way, hopefully.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There were some comments in the chat that were funny. Somebody referenced Jeremy Irons, has a line in the movie Margin Call, and he says, maybe you can tell me what is going on, and please speak as you might to a young child or a golden retriever. And that's how one person remembers to keep it simple. So that's a great line. To another person, this comment resonated with me. The structure looks like Iraq. the issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. I'm going to have nightmares about that later. Keep it simple, stupid, accuracy, brevity, and clarity is a good one. I have another good question. What if you're dealing with a colleague who, is a lawyer, and they tend to dance around important issues or decisions? How do you, again, it's kind of like, how do you confront without being confrontational? Any tips on that?
I mean, one thing you can do is send them to me, and they can join my coaching program. I joke. I mean, one way I think One way is, is there a way, is there a nice way to review their work to say, look, I'm not seeing anything that's actually happening here. Like, we need results and you're not delivering it. I think, it's a challenge, right? To pick up on someone's stuff and say, I don't think you're being as effective and as useful as possible. But I guess, is there a formal review process? Can you do like a 360 review? Has anyone done those? They're awful. But a 360 review, because sometimes getting that client feedback is back, saying, I found that working with this person wasn't great because they didn't provide me a solution, is sometimes the wake-up call people need. So maybe that's a challenging one. I mean, I've had situations where I've had staff, because I used to run a bit of a team. I had staff who, I needed them to improve in what they were doing, which is fine. So, working with them to say, hey, I'm going to sit down with you and show you something I've done, like showing your own work and being vulnerable to explain how you do things can help other people as well. So saying, this is how I've done it. Do you want to use what I've done as an example, only because I know it helped me when someone showed me how to do it? So, using that. Sometimes if someone's more senior than you, it could be awkward to have that conversation. Something I also had to do, I had someone who was just really ineffective in how they were explaining stuff. And I said, you know what? Think about it like this. Here's another way I've done it. So it's a challenge. It's always a challenge. Someone in the comments said, maybe use humor to diffuse the situation. Sometimes that could make things a bit more complicated and awkward though. But, whatever works. I think it's going to be very context dependent and circumstance dependent.
Yeah. I just got another good question. Is there a diplomatic way to tell our internal customers, or even external customers, that a contract is not of high enough value for us to negotiate a particular clause, or even to negotiate at all? I've just seen it in practice. Like, this is not, they don't accept red lines on these types of contracts. It's not as simple as saying that. But what do you think?
Yeah. That is something that I've done before as well, to say, look, thank you so much for the work you put into this. Unfortunately, we don't tend to accept red lines because of the nature of this transaction. Noting that it's below, $10,000, we don't see the value in us spending our time, where it could be used more valuably. Also noting as well, this contract was designed in a particular way to work effectively for both you and us, right? And if it's not working like that, maybe that is the point where maybe the terms need to be reviewed. Maybe the contract needs to be updated so it is more effective and clear, so it is a bit more balanced. Like, maybe that's a review process thing as well. But I think it is okay to say, no, we're not accepting red line, given the fact that it is such a low value, low risk situation, and we don't need to change, the indemnity clauses for a situation where there is no risk of the indemnity clause ever being used.
Right. I would say, I wouldn't even, go into that much detail. I would just say, we don't, given the nature of this deal, we don't, engage in red lines, and just call it a day. And it's not low value or this or that. Just say, this is how we do it. And, we designed it to be fair and meant to be evergreen, so to speak. And that's that, it's plenty diplomatic. Whoever is on the other side, I've heard that a million times. So I wouldn't even twice about it. So Manjit likes to use humor to diffuse tense situations, or channel his unrequited desire to be a comedian. I think many lawyers suffer from that, unrequited desire. I got another great question, and this is communication with internal sales, who always, in their rush to make a deal, don't want to use our paper, or want to use the customer paper, and the customer paper probably is not well suited for this deal. Probably is going to take a lot of work to retrofit. So how do we communicate with our sales rep to use company paper, for that?
Story of my life. I was GC for a company. I was sole legal counsel GC for a company where it was a sales environment. So I just had to be really clear with them to say, you must use our paper first as priority, because I explain it like this, right? For you to get your commission quicker and get this deal over the line, using our paper will get you there. Using another party's paper is going to take way more time, and it's going to cause back and forth that you don't want to deal with, right? Like, you don't want to deal with that. That's not cool. That's not fun for anyone. So yeah, I think just explaining that. And then you need to teach the salespeople how to push back. It's okay for them to say, sorry, this is our paper. Like, we use our paper for this transaction. Like, it's a very specific product. The governance around its use, whatever, is structured really clearly in our format. So like the standard MSA that you've given me isn't gonna work. So it's enabling and empowering our salespeople to push back and have that conversation. And then it's the what's in it for me that will motivate them to actually not use that client paper, to push, our paper first, which, is sometimes the best motivation.
Definitely. Yes, definitely. Prior presentations, people have said that. Like, one GC said that he was able to quantify how much time saved he used the company paper. So, there's plenty of justification to get them to use it. It'll slow down the deal. And that's a very legitimate reason. So a few more comments in. I'm going to read them. And then if you have any last minute questions, speak now or hold your peace. And then we'll do a little bit of virtual networking. If you want to engage in virtual networking, you can turn on your camera, let us know, and then I'll share more information on that. But it looks like, Candace says, whether she negotiates a contract depends on, who she's representing, how much leverage we have, but 99% of the time, that's Cindy, usually their changes get through, or there's no changes, they're usually accepted without changes. And like Oren is curious about metrics, all right, metrics for in-house counsel, contract metrics. I would say, like, how do you quantify how much time it saves? I would say, take a sample or look back at the last 10 contracts you entered into. Some have on your paper, some are not, and see what the average time to close is, and use that as a start. And, you don't have to be like a statistician. You could be like, oh yeah, unofficially the last 10 contracts I did, I saw that, contracts on our forms were, closed a week faster. That will get their attention. So I think that's a good way to do it. At least when she gets pushback, then she just copies and pastes the key terms from our paper and puts it in. That's a common, in-house counsel tool. So I have one last question. Sometimes legal is put in the middle of a dispute between internal groups within the organization. And legal, we're often a facilitator or connector between the departments. Any tips on facilitating solutions? So, legal as a peacemaker or a mediator.
This is another story of my life. Why does it always happen, right? Get stuck in the middle. Two departments don't talk to each other. They talk to legal, and then you're meant to be the one to like make it work. I found that I had to just connect the gaps, right, and bring it together. So I think it was like our procurement group and our commercial property group. They weren't talking to each other. They'd only talk to us. And I thought, this is so annoying, because they complain about the other. They wouldn't, integrate. They wouldn't connect. So I had to make that happen. I think I brought a meeting. I said, look, I'm getting messages from over here. I'm getting messages over there. We can bring this all together. So let's just have a, facilitated conversation. And I sat in there as the mediator, and it was really weird. And I, explained, what were some of the issues that were being had. So we did a bit of a structure. So what are the issues you're facing? What are the issues you're facing? And how can we make that work? How can we bring that together? So establishing a bit of a connection and a conversation between, the parties was really good. And just being, I think once again, it's that idea of clarity and being clear. Like, can we say, okay, what's going on for you? What's the issue here? Can we deal with this situation effectively? Can we have a conversation about what the issues are? And then can we find a solution? Like, can I help facilitate something? Like, is it a process issue? Like, do we need to like create a RACI? Do we need to create like an infographic on how this is explained? Whatever it might be, bring me in. I'm happy to help you out. It's an annoying position to be in when you become that middle person, but if you can help facilitate that conversation and facilitate the solution, then great. Legal looks really cool at the end of the day. And we love that. We love being a helper. I don't know about you, but I saw a reel the other day where they used like an audio that said, not my monkeys, not my circus. But then, something happened and they're like, oh, my monkeys, my circus. And, wanting to like get in there and solve that problem. I think legal is often that sort of helper. We want to get in there and help out the situation, provide that solution. So something to think about, bit of fun.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Theo.